am Howard Kelly with S&S's Proven Performance Podcast, and I have with me today Hunter Klee, who heads up our exhaust lab and our emissions lab. Welcome, Hunter.
Thank you, Howard.
So, Hunter, I'm going to jump right into asking you completely unscripted questions because I want to keep you on your toes. When we talk about exhaust for a V-twin motorcycle, what's the ideal configuration for a motor? Don't make your face yet. I'm going to clarify it. Ideal configuration for a guy that wants to have a fast, fun bike on the street.
Ideal configuration, it's going to come down to a few different things. There's not, in the market today, there's not a lot of bad exhaust. I think first and foremost, most guys that are trying to hot rod on the street, they're going for a certain look. So that may be, a guy may want a shorter pipe or a longer pipe, depending on that. And then sound would be his next one. And then in our world, first and foremost would be performance and how it would affect the motorcycle. Personally, if I was going for a hot rod bike, I would go with a long 2-in-1 for a touring Harley Davidson.
So not drag pipes.
No, not drag pipes.
Why not? Drag pipes make your bike fast.
They make it sound really fast, and to each their own. I mean, that's great. There's also 2-in-1s that are real short and dump out the side that on a certain motorcycle look cool, but they generally don't have the performance that your other longer 2-in-1s are going to have with proper size primaries and secondaries and collectors and all the way out to the end of the muffler.
So you're saying that exhaust length as well as configuration affects performance?
Yeah, it really, for the most part, comes down to exhaust velocity is probably the biggest portion of it, flow and velocity. You don't want it going too slow, and you don't want it coming out too fast. And I don't mean speed by that, but you don't want it dumping out super quick either. And it leads to all kinds of problems, tuning notwithstanding out of those. It'd be really difficult to tune a set of drag pipes compared to a nice, well-designed 2-in-1.
So what does that mean, 2-in-1?
So basically you have 2 cylinders and you have 1 muffler. So 2-in-1.
So you've got 2 head pipes coming together with a collector.
Yep. Two primaries, possibly a couple secondaries if there's a step in it, into a collector, and then into a single muffler.
And what does the collector do?
It's a loaded question. It can properly placed. It could actually send a perfectly timed wave back up into the exhaust port and create a good scavenging effect. And both of those can time off of each other and pick up a little extra performance over any other 2-in-1 that wouldn't have that scavenging effect.
Okay. So how does the length affect the performance?
And
like example, we have a Challenger exhaust.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Perfect question. So the easiest way for people to understand it, and I'll just do some real basic rule of thumb rules. There's exceptions to every rule of thumb every single time, but rules of thumb are pretty good. Your shorter pipe is generally going to perform better on the top end in the higher RPM range, and you're going to give a little bit up at the bottom end for that performance on the top. A longer pipe is going to give you more bottom to mid range and then probably lose a little bit on top. And when you look at a dyno chart, their eyes always go right to the far right, and they look at that peak number without realizing that's 100% throttle in 4th or 5th gear on the dyno. You're not seeing that a whole lot from 2000 RPM all the way up to redline. You're really spending the meat of your time in those lower to mid RPM ranges, and that's why I suggested the longer pipe to begin with. Is that's where you live and that's where you want it to be.
All right, I'm going to change topics for you for a moment. How do you build an exhaust to have good sound?
It comes down to customer preference. So,
but you design exhausts, right?
Yeah.
How do you set out in the morning to say I'm going to build a new exhaust for the new Harley ST, and it's going to sound great because I'm going to do this?
So for most people, it's about attenuating the higher frequencies, which just means eliminating the higher frequencies of noise or sound through the exhaust. Easiest way to do that is, and you'll see it in dang near every exhaust you'll ever look at, it'll have a perforated core inside of it, which is just a tube with a bunch of holes. And it'll have some sort of packing inside of it, an e-glass or a basalt, or there's a handful of different materials. And that really does the best job of attenuating the high frequencies. And the high frequencies are what hurts people's ears. You will have a subset of people that love those high frequencies, though, and those are our drag pipe guys, and they love that pop and that harshness, and that's okay too. Just catering to the 90% or 80%, I guess.
Okay. So you didn't answer my question though. How do you set out to build an exhaust that sounds good? Like, you've got to have some kind of plan, or you've got to know that if you put a certain amount of perforations, or if you put a certain amount of packing material, you do this all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little nerdy to get it, because there are obviously packing densities that you want to be at. You don't want your packing too tight. You don't want your packing too loose. Too tight packing will not attenuate the higher frequencies as good. If your packing is looser, has a tendency to break down and wear out faster, which is also not good. I think if you're setting out to build an exhaust, I mean, there's so many factors. Sound is one of them. Performance is the biggest one for us. And then you've got looks too, because if it doesn't look good, nobody's going to want to buy it. So a lot of times we'll start with CAD of the, we'll have if we get OEM CAD, that's amazing if we ever get that. But otherwise, it's a 3D scan of the motorcycle. And we just kind of start putting stuff on there that fits, because it has to fit the motorcycle first. And you could have the best performing exhaust in the world that sounds better than anybody else's, but if every time the guy throws his leg on the bike, he burns his calf, there's no point. So you have your envelope that you have to work inside, and you do the best with what you're given out of that. And that, I mean, you look at us and competitors and everybody else, there's a lot of different ways to do it. I don't think any of them are wrong. I don't think any of them are 100% right, but we all have the same window to work in. And, ours, my point of view as being a rider myself is that it's got to be rideable, and you got to be able to crank out 1,000 miles in a day on it and hold together and not burn yourself.
Well, not burning yourself is good, because jeans get expensive after a while.
Yeah.
So a couple other things I want to talk about. Back pressure, open pipes. I know the myth, right? If you have open pipes, your bike's fast because there's nothing to slow it down. And that's true if you are drag racing and you're at the throttle stop the whole time. But if you're going up a hill, if you're traffic, if you're too up on the motorcycle, back pressure becomes a factor in how the bike performs, right?
And I think back pressure is really, it's an easier way for people to understand exhaust velocity is really what it comes down to, because you do want a certain amount of velocity to come out through your pipes, and that helps with so many things. And it goes, we're talking specifically about exhaust, but I mean, your exhaust is hand in hand with your camshaft. Your exhaust is hand in hand with the intake. It's an entire system working together. And if you have one of those off or way out in left field, stuff isn't going to work. And that's, you go back in the past of a guy who put straight pipes on his carbureted shovel head, and then suddenly he's got to use torque cones in the headers to get everything to work right. If you start getting into the weeds and doing stuff like that, you've got something in your system that's not right. And you want things that work together and are well designed. And that doesn't necessarily mean everything's from the same brand or anything like that, but all your pieces have to be together for a common goal. You don't want a race carburetor on an otherwise stock motorcycle. You don't want a full-on king of the baggers race exhaust on an otherwise stock motorcycle. Things aren't going to work together, and you're not going to get the performance that you need. You may get a part that you think you need, but you're not going to get what you actually need out of it.
So you mentioned something before, and I want to go back to it. You design in CAD and fit everything. You build our exhausts on the dyno, though, don't you?
Yeah. So, and I'd be
Kind of, can you
lying.
kind of tell? I'm plugging S&S at the moment
Oh,
because I don't
absolutely.
think enough people know we actually make exhausts and the way we make them. But could you kind of take people through what I mean by you build our exhaust on the dyno?
So, I mean, sometimes we get lucky. Sometimes we make a pipe and it works right out of the gate and it's perfect, and we don't have to go back to the dyno a whole lot. More often than not, we don't get lucky and we go back and we're changing diameters and lengths and steps and where they happen. And
Hold 1 second right there.
Yep.
Just in case someone doesn't know, what's a step in an exhaust?
So I kind of referenced it a little bit earlier. If you go on a header, if you go from a primary to what we'd call a secondary, that would be a step in a different size in the exhaust. And
wait. So again, I don't build exhausts every day. Perhaps someone watching doesn't know, it is even less knowledgeable than I am, which is hope not, because I don't know anything. But explain that what you're talking. So you're talking about like the diameter of where the pipe connects with the cylinder might be X, and then a step would either be larger or smaller. But could you explain the dimension difference maybe?
It's almost always larger when you step as you go down in the exhaust, and velocity changes with length and with size, and sometimes to optimize the pipe, you're gonna want different sizes as you get down it. And then also, and I'm many people probably won't talk about this, but there's other manufacturing advantages throughout it that help with steps and things like that as well. You'll see it not a whole lot on stock American V-twin motorcycles, but you'll see it a lot more in the Japanese motorcycles where they'll have steps, and those steps are all there for a very specific reason. And you can get a scavenging pulse from a step that'll go back. So say you have, and I'll make the numbers up, but say you're 17 inches away and you guys find out that, hey, 17 inches, when we put a step there, that seems to perform better on the dyno. A lot of times it's causing a scavenging wave to go back and actually create a vacuum at the port by the exhaust valve to help pull out and pull in fresh fuel as it goes through. So it's super complicated, and to try to sum it up in a short little thing is difficult. And like I said just a short while ago, that's a rule of thumb, and you're going to find plenty of examples in the world and with different exhausts and different applications where the rule of thumb doesn't apply.
So I have two questions I want to ask. I'm going to go to the first one. Again, I am absolutely plugging our exhaust because I love the way your shop looks. What kind of quality things do we do that set S&S exhausts apart from our hundreds of competitors?
So the main thing, and other people are catching on. I won't say that we're alone in this anymore. At the time we were. All of our headers are 100% stainless steel. All of our baffles are 100% stainless steel. That is a durability. The reasons behind that are for durability. Several years ago, the Motor Co. switched over as well. It's progression. It's progression in the industry to make parts better. The other thing that we do that I don't think a lot of other people do, and I can't say they don't for sure, but we have a lot of cleaning steps in the process where we are thoroughly making sure all of our parts are clean from one step to the next to provide the customer with the best possible part.
And all of our parts are made in the United States, right?
Well, of course, that's a given.
Sometimes people don't know.
Yeah, we're made.
And
so
in your facility, you're bending, creating welding, creating the heat shields, creating the whole deal,
soup to nuts. So it's right here in the heartland of La Crosse, Wisconsin, is where we make everything.
So before I leave this topic, you're also building all of our pipes in a compliant and a race version, aren't you?
Yeah, we do.
You want to explain about our emissions lab having some benefit to that?
So the shift in the world for cleaner air it's a real thing, and everybody knows it. I think where we're taking a slightly different approach than everybody else is that we're doing it through performance. So all of our catalyzed exhaust systems perform as good, if not better, than a lot of our competition in a compliant state. That's not to say that you can take a 180 horsepower touring M8 bike and put a cat exhaust on it. That's not going to work. That will not have good results. But yeah, in compliant state, which is really where most people need to be. I mean, we have examples of it here at the shop, but we can do 140 horsepower fully compliant. And 10 years ago, before M8s, 140 horsepower out of a twin cam in full race spec was very difficult to get. So yeah, we are compliant first, and we do offer race only for people who are doing racing activities and things like that. But yeah, the focus is on compliant or performance through compliance, I guess is the best way to put it.
I feel like that's an important thing for us to let people know.
And we do a lot of work throughout the industry with other companies, helping them become compliant, and they utilize our lab as a testing facility for their products as well.
So there's a thing that's been in the news a lot lately about how exhausts work, and the word that's getting thrown around is reversion.
Yeah.
I call it back pressure, but everybody else is calling it reversion. Am I wrong in what I'm saying with back pressure versus reversion? And do you want to explain what reversion is?
So I believe back pressure could cause reversion. But reversion is really, it's the air going what we would call the wrong way in the exhaust. And I think a lot of people are getting scavenging and reversion mixed up in this conversation.
Okay.
Because scavenging is a pulse going back that will create a vacuum at your exhaust port, and reversion is actually the exhaust fluid, if you will, going back into the chamber, into the combustion chamber, and get all the way back through your intake manifold as well. And I touched on it a little bit in that earlier, in that it comes down. And again, I have not had my hands, and I don't think anybody here has had our hands on anything that's had an issue with reversion and any kind of damage. But what is likely happening is the exhaust velocity is too slow, the intake velocity is too slow, and it's not carrying any inertia through and allowing that exhaust gas to come back in. Now, that should only happen at idle or low RPM, and the reversion should not happen if you're at a higher RPM. But it's, if you have a big Lopi cam, intake manifold that's possibly oversized, then perfect for the application.
So you're saying that all the parts of the performance package should work together?
Yeah, they should work together. And
you don't just put a big cam or a big intake and just say, well, I'm going to go faster now?
It'll sound cool. and it'll likely be a little faster, but yeah, you can get into a lot of trouble just parts bending something like that. But so
I'm going to wrap this up with another shameless plug for our stuff. You're of course, you're the guy in our exhaust world. If you had to tell the people watching this why they should look at S&S exhaust over anyone else on the market, what would that be?
Quality is a big one. And again, nothing against any of our competitors. A lot of people make great products. But quality, performance, and made in the USA.
And of the designs we have right now, do you have a personal favorite?
Yeah, I think the Super Street for the Softails is kind of my baby, and it's not going to fit on the 25 and forward Softails, and that hurts a little bit. So the Super Street's going to probably get it changed and make it different. And that one's my baby. Yeah, Super Street for sure.
Cool. Hunter, thanks very much, man. I really appreciate you taking the time today, educating me and the people watching a little bit. And for those of you that don't know, if you go to sscycle.com and look under exhaust, you'll see all of Hunter's work. And it is really a nice set of things that he's doing over there. Hunter, thanks very much, man.
Thank you, Howard.